Hey there, down here. Hope you're doing well. Now, I'm going to jump into our facade calculator. This is version 1.1 of NCC 2025. This is effectively a direct replacement for boring spreadsheets and is a much more dynamic process that aims to provide a quick and easy way to comply. This is going to be very useful for early design stage, but it can be used for the full compliance process as far as we are concerned. So for our folks using the platform, we are going to be integrating all of this work directly onto the platform moving forward. So you don't necessarily need to use this. However, we are waiting for lots of questions to be answered from the powers that be within the ABCB. And until we do so, until we hear back, we are bound by unknowns, and those unknowns mean that we cannot push out anything because ultimately we bear some level of responsibility for the interpretations of the National Construction Code, which of course we cannot do. So for the time being, and hopefully this is going to be something that is resolved very quickly because we have been waiting some months for feedback from the ABCB. This will give you a way of proceeding if you are, particularly if you're in Victoria, or if you are exposed to clients that want to go ahead and adopt the National Construction Code 2025. Up in the top here, we have a bunch of buttons, a bunch of inputs, a bunch of things that you can consider. The most important one is dark mode. It's not the most important one, but it does make life easier to view these inputs and outputs. We have climate zone. We have the building class. So we can obviously go ahead and select these and see the corresponding change in results as a function of the specified glazing and wall systems and window to wall ratios and shading. We can see the difference between these two groupings of building classes, class 5 and 9, and 39C and 9A. As we will see, there's a continual trend of having very, very onerous requirements for class 3, 9C and 9A, which is frankly difficult to understand. Under glazing products, we have a few indicative glazing products here that are fairly standard stuff and allow us to provide some quick selection. Let's go ahead and select something like this. Extremely standard products here. This has a total system value of 2.7, a solar heat gain coefficient, total glazing of 0.35, and we're going to throw up a 1.4 there for the wall system. Should we want to change these things, we can change these things and slide that to the left, and we'll see a corresponding change as we go through this process. So I'm going to stick these at 0.35 because it's very standard, and then we can move on to what else we can see on the screen. Over here on the left we have window to wall ratio and shading. These are locked per orientation, so that means I can change inputs on the north, and that will result in corresponding changes to the east, south, and west. As an example, let's slide that there. We can see it all sliding. Let's slide the P and H. We can see it all sliding. So there you go, and you'll see a corresponding change of comply and not comply, or does not comply on the front end. Let's set these at 40% as a value that has just been dropped in there. No rhyme nor reason for that one, other than probably an acceptable value for glazing from a performance perspective, at least, is around 35 to 40%. However, of course, large buildings have lots of glazing. There is absolutely no way that the deemed to satisfy provisions will support high volumes of glazing without extensive shading moving forward. That also means that the reference building is going to be heavily penalised from a cooling perspective, because the deemed satisfied provisions are always going to have very low solar heat gain coefficients, meaning that the J1B3 process is not a simple process to comply with moving forward and may need to leverage services as a result. meaning that it's more cost effective to go through this process if you can, but if you can't, then it becomes a much more lengthy exercise, would be my prediction. Before we jump into actually using this tool, I'll just make a note of you can load projects, you can save projects, you can look at project details, you can look at the workings behind the tool, and you can also export PDF, Word, HTML, all formats, zip it, bundle it, you get everything. Okay, and then down here we have an ability to apply max window tool ratio as a function of the inputs that have been presented up here. And we've also added it on a function there for required shading. So effectively, if you wanted to go ahead and design based on a max solution for window tool ratio, which we're not suggesting that you necessarily do, and you have required shading per face and you accept that, then you can go ahead and just nominate this apply max window tool ratio. This then uses these values that are automatically generated for you within this climate zone, within this building class, with these glazing requirements, and then updates these here to match. That's all that's doing. But what it does mean is that there is a significant amount of shading that is likely required to meet these window to wall ratios. I'm going to move those back there like that so we can start to see how effective that shading actually is. And then I'm going to pull this back here. So I'm going to turn all of that off. Okay, so let's add a dollop of realism into this process. Okay, we have two very opinionated groups of building classes here. That's fine. We have performance requirements that we can tweak along the way, and we'll see a thermal improvement here for the U value side of things, but we're not going to see much here because it's all about solar heat gain coefficient for method 1 and method 2. Let's go ahead and see what we can do here. So imagine you were given a project. That project was stating that, hey, I want to go ahead and either have a meter squared rate for your glazing or a percentage. Percentage is easier to work with as an example. And then should you want to add on different additional cardinal directions, you can, just down there. But let's say you wanted a window tool ratio of, for round numbers, let's go to 50% here, okay? So 50%. We had solar heat gain coefficient at 0.32, a total system U value 2.7, and we can see that, hey, this isn't working. We are not complying in method 1 or method 2 here. And if you'd like to see a graphical display of that, you can see it here for method 1, method 2, or both should you wish. I'm going to focus on method 2 because I know that method 2 is far more flexible. If we unlock here and said, do you know what? We've actually got less shading here on our, let's do the east and the west. So east, 27%, very, very random. West, 27%. Now we're seeing the profile change here as a result, and we're seeing the method 2 come into play. So what it might mean is that to get this over the line, a solar heat gain coefficient of 0.25 might be the solution. Could be. Let's say we didn't want to go there. We could only sit with 0.29 for whatever reason, aesthetic reasons. We can see that the north here is effectively what we need to improve because we want to get the design within the orange dotted square here. So we can go ahead and say, okay, I want to build out some additional shading here and push that out to meet compliance that way. So it becomes quite a flexible, dynamic process to meet these requirements. Of course, we haven't met it via the method 1. I'm purposely not diving into the National Construction Code here because I'm assuming that if you're reading this, you have some comprehension of it. Or sorry, listening to this, watching this. But let's say, there you go, that's an example. That's how you can comply. And effectively you are then set up to go ahead and read through the workings, get a feel for what's going on here. We're being very, very transparent around all of this. You can jump into your project details. Should you want to update your project details, please go ahead and do that. You can save your project, and then you can export your project as mentioned in PDF, Word, HTML, and all formats. I'm going to go and grab the HTML. Okay, that's the HTML report printed out there for you now. And we can see this. We've got project information here, what's been specified. A couple of graphics there just to kind of break it down a bit. I think they've got a bit of work to do on the text there. The text is just missing from those. This is also available in Word as well, right? So if you do have any questions, any things that you want to change, go ahead and change it. You are more than free to change everything. And then we've got our standard disclaimer down the bottom there. So we've kept it light and easy and breezy. Up the top here, we don't want to overly explain this stuff. That will be more detailed on the platform. But for the time being, this gives you a great opportunity to go ahead and print out reports for the National Construction Code. Now, for folks on the platform, should you have any questions around this particular process, please feel free to shout out. We can make this as flexible as we need to make this, but this is really our way of running some diagnostic and parametric assessments of this process, because effectively that's what a lot of folk are going to be doing moving forward. And we're more than happy to share this with you, so you can go ahead and use this on your projects. This is now being distributed to Better Building users only. So if you're not a Better Building user, you'd probably want to reach out and shout out so we can provide you with access to this via the platform itself. And we'll be providing a deep integration of this work into the platform within the next month or two. There you go. How long did it take? It took a few minutes, 13 minutes in total. This is a useful way to meet the requirements of the code, and it's giving us a very, very clear way of understanding what's going to happen moving forward, particularly as we move to these building classes that are far more onerous. So the question becomes what happens from a compliance point of view in this case, because as you can see by the pink on the screen here, we are exceeding our budget quite significantly, and the chances of using deemed to satisfy for Class 3, 9C and 9A are pretty low, given that the window to wall ratio is likely to be, I think it's going to be at 20% or lower. So really that's probably a magic number there for you to even start with. You want to be pushing your designs to at least 20% window to wall ratio, or there or thereabouts, in order to use the Class 3, 9C and 9A. And that's only the case if you've got all cardinal directions selected. If you were to effectively take some out of the mix, then you will find that it becomes a more flexible approach down this end of the scale. And for this type of building, some, not necessarily Class 3, can easily meet 20% window to wall ratio as a standard, given that they are often assets that are have low glazing window to wall ratios. That's it, guys. Thanks a million. Take care. Bye-bye.